Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Intellectual Intercourse. I'm Tranna.
And I'm Adam.
Adam, there's a question I've always wanted to ask you.
What is it?
Are you straight?
As you can probably tell so far in these episodes, you will never get a straight answer from me. But I have to say that if there is something that I'm sure of in my life, up until this point, who knows what tomorrow will bring.
Right.
But to date, since I was young, I have known that I was not straight, that I did not have the characteristics or the mental capacity to be straight or the desire to be straight. I knew at a very young age that I was different, that I was what I would identify as gay. And it's been quite consistent throughout my entire life.
What does, like that gayness that you felt so early on, what what sort of illuminated you? Like, was it an attraction to a specific man? Like, how did you know what that was?
Yeah, we kind of touched on it in our first episode when we talked about gender. And I can remember that I was disoriented quite a bit, that wherever I looked or whatever I tried, it just didn't fit for me. So if I was interested in, saying, going to try to play hockey or participating in things that were typical of the boys of my age,
Right.
it felt like a complete, like, opposite magnets trying to connect, and I was just being pushed away from it. I
Right.
was like, this is not me. It doesn't fit. And it felt super uncomfortable, like a performance that just
Right.
wasn't working well for me. And then when I would do things that were much more aligned to my personality, like ceramics, painting,
Right.
hanging out with the girls,
Yeah.
like I would look around and it would be all girls around me. And that's the place that I felt the safest. And I don't know if it was that I had an attraction to men, like that didn't come early, but I knew at a really early age that I felt, I guess, attracted to being in an environment where people were expressing themselves in a softer way.
Right.
Yeah.
What I find so interesting about that, and we did touch on it in our first episode, um, and what I'm hearing you describe is really interesting because I feel like the things you're describing are kind of more aligned with gender identity, whereas orientation, I feel like, is sort of what we're drawn to on an attraction level. But it's interesting to hear you say that you understood to a certain extent your orientation by your proximity to femininity.
Yeah, I think so. I can remember the language and the feeling and the things that girls were interested in. And that was boys, obviously, as well. And I was like really clear that I was aligning with a lot of the things that they were interested
Mhm.
in. But the orientation or attraction to male and the male body came later. It wasn't until I opened a Sears Canada catalog that I knew that I was really into men in underwear.
So, like, how old were you at that time of discovery?
I don't know. I was very young. Like I
Okay.
came out to my parents when I was like 13 years old.
Wow, that's really
So
young for
I,
people of our
yeah,
generation.
and it was really clear to me, and it really solidified. Like I was sure of it when I was about 16.
How did you tell them?
I first told them that I was bisexual, and you know,
Always using the buys as a shield.
yes. It's so interesting too because I feel like during that period, bisexuality had such a bad, like, reputation, or, like, we
Mm.
used it as a tool to
Yeah.
come out,
Even I use that tool too.
and, like, we discredited all of the people that are actually bisexual, or, like, it was hard for them to just be that and be fluid in
Yeah.
that sort of, like, orientations or desires. But yeah, like I'm glad that we've caught up in the world and that like bisexuality has a place.
Yeah.
But yeah, my attraction to men really started with catalogs and images because I didn't really see um, boys in the world in that way, and the only moments that I were confronted with it were in the locker room at school
Right.
during gym. And for a queer person, or somebody going through that self-discovery at that age, the locker room is such a scary place.
Definitely.
And then you sort of like couple it with this like desire and attraction, and it becomes really complicated to be able to unpack it.
Do you think that you mentioned that idea of, like, images,
Yeah.
in your case, the Sears catalog. God bless the Sears catalog, honestly, it had everything you could ever want, including the men. But do you think that those early images of masculinity and your attraction to those images or what they represented sort of forged an idea of what you're attracted to in others?
Yeah. For sure, I think there is a body element of like underwear models have a specific shape. At least they did in the like 80s and 90s. The style was quite revealing. I think it was a bit progressive. And even still to this day, I prefer looking at a man in underwear and swimwear than them being completely nude.
Okay.
So like if I go back throughout my dating history and using dating apps, like when I would get a nude, I'd be like, stop, like let me have the mystery. Then if we're in the bedroom, I can see what's under it. But
Okay.
there's definitely a prudeness to me, and that's highly shaped by what I had access to.
Right.
Yeah.
But do you feel like the forging of your orientation in relation to these images sort of, um, not kept you in a box, but did it limit what you're attracted to? Not that it would be a conscious choice, but do you find that through your life, the men that you've been attracted to fit the Sears catalog sort of, stereotype?
Yes and no. I mean, I've always had a contradiction between what I would write down as my description of what I think that I'm attracted to.
Mhm.
But then if I look at all of the people that I've had serious or intimate relationships in my life, they tend to follow a completely different category. I think that there's probably a conscious idea of what I am or humans can be attracted to, like what you think.
Mhm.
But then in reality, I think there's so many other factors. There's like smell, there's body shape, there's personality. Like a lot needs to come together than what I think we originally define on the surface of what we're attracted to.
Right.
Like the Sears Canada catalog was very visual. Often I didn't even see their faces. It was just torsos and underwear.
Right.
And but like at the same time, I would never meet somebody if I never saw their face. So I don't think that it shaped me in a lot of ways, but it did have an influence, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. What about you? Are you straight?
I don't know. I mean, it's strange because I think that, like, as a trans feminine person who is attracted to men, in some ways that is very hetero.
Yeah.
But I don't feel comfortable calling myself straight.
Okay.
Like, I don't know, I think that maybe it's the associations that I have to the word straight or the concept of heteronormativity that I don't really feel like I fit into.
Uh-huh.
Although sometimes for me there is a fantasy of heteronormativity, which, like, we've kind of alluded to in previous episodes, but sometimes I think that sometimes it feels almost like in my femininity, I'm taking on a role and trying to fit into the heteronormative
Yeah.
paradigm or whatever you wanna call it, um, even though when I do that, it's never fulfilling because the person that I'm with and that I'm sort of playing out that fantasy with is not getting the real me, so it doesn't feel real.
Mhm.
Um, but I am attracted to men.
Okay.
Like you, I don't negate the possibility that I could meet someone, outside of that gender identity that I could totally find myself attracted to, and if that should happen, I would welcome it and embrace it, but it hasn't happened yet. I feel like I was very boy crazy from, like, a very young age.
Okay.
And like you, I mean, there was the catalog for sure. I feel like my biggest thing, though, in terms of attraction or like the early feelings of attraction was really the men in soap operas, who are
Yes.
not dissimilar to the men in the Sears catalog. Like they very much look the same way. But I think that with the soap operas, it was more than just an image because there was a character, there was a personality. And I think that on a very superficial level, on the old soap operas, like there were these like power dynamics between men and women. And the women on the show were very hyper feminine and the men on the show were very hyper masculine. And those were the only two kind of modes of
Yeah.
expression. And I think in watching those shows, like I could see sometimes the power of femininity. Like I could see how some of the women on the show or well, the characters would use their female sexuality to get what they wanted from men, which I
Yes.
thought was really alluring, like that power. But then I could also see how sort of powerless they were made to feel in their attraction for these men.
Uh-huh.
Like they were willing to do so much to have these men reciprocate their feelings. So these women would often like go on these like massive missions to like seduce the man that they wanted and like trap them. Sometimes successfully, sometimes not. But I think that it showed me um, at an early and impressionable age, this idea that to have a man want you is like the ultimate
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah, it sounds like you're describing yourself like this long, big, grandiose effort to seduce and like trap somebody.
I mean, no, I don't do that intentionally. But I do think that, again, like I learned that power dynamic so
Sure.
early on, and it's very outdated and it's very, again, rooted in very rigid and antiquated ideas of like female versus
Sure.
male. But I do think that it had such a strong impression on me
Yeah,
that I am still feeling the influence of those soap operas in my life today and in the dynamics of the relationships with the people that I'm attracted to.
sure. I think you bring up an interesting point, or I'm trying to pick it apart in my head right now, but you talk about like it's difficult to say, oh, I'm straight or feel comfortable with that term. And then there's also this whole culture aspect of orientation, like gay or bi and lesbian or trans, that there's like, if I would look at you and see the things that you're interested in and the things that you gravitate towards, just on a cultural level, it's very gay.
Exactly.
So,
That's why I'm like, I've said it like on stage before, but I really mean it. Like, how can I have Barbra Streisand's entire discography on vinyl and call myself straight?
yeah,
Like, it doesn't make sense, you
yeah,
know, like, culturally, absolutely, I'm much more aligned with queerness and gay culture, like, there's no question.
yeah.
There's very little in straight culture that influences me, even though, again, in my childhood, it had a very big influence on me because
Yes.
that's all that I had access to.
And I think that's one thing that's a bit sad, that I think we attach a lot of meaning to sexual orientation, almost like at the cultural level. And sometimes I have straight friends that are really into what I would call like gay culture
Yeah.
or experience. And they feel like, oh, well, I'm a queer ally. Yes,
Mhm.
but it's even more than that. But because of the term of like, oh, this is a gay aspect or a gay understanding of something or a lens of looking at it, it almost can exclude straight people from, just not being able to access that culture in an interesting way.
Right. Well, I've always felt that, like I mean, for me personally, I don't know if we've said this on a previous episode or not, but I do feel like for me, there's a strong connection between queerness and punk. Like to me, being queer is like being anti-establishment,
Right.
and queer art or gay culture, art wise, like is tends to always be kind of outsidery.
Yeah.
You know, it's like usually a response or even like an opposition to straight culture,
Yeah.
which resonates with me much more deeply.
Me too. I mean, I love the idea of queer. Like, I
Me
think
too.
everybody is
I
queer.
think so too.
And there's space for everybody in that term. And
Well,
I
there is space for everyone, but do they want
right,
it?
yes.
That's the other thing. Like, obviously, there are straight people that have a severe repulsion
Yeah,
to anything remotely gay.
yeah.
Um,
I just like it as a term. Like, I prefer using that. Like, I often try to think of like queer or looking at things from a queer perspective versus it being gay or any other term. I just feel like it's the one that has worked for me the most.
queer, the word queer, like to
Yeah,
identify your sexuality.
I think so, yeah. I think that there's a little bit of radicalness in it. There's the opposition, there's more freedom and flexibility, I think, within the term. And I mean, I use gay interchangeably, but
Right,
I think as a term, if I were to write it down and say, like, no, I approach the world from a queer lens,
right.
that feels more aligned with who I am.
Yeah.
But I
I
guess,
I think there's still a part of me that's chasing the conventional man. Like, I'm still drawn to that. I'm still drawn to the stereotype of the alpha male,
yeah,
the man who, on an appearance level, is like tall, handsome, strong jawline,
yeah,
big muscles, hairy chest, big thighs, like a man. Like I I do find that over these last few years, the people that I find myself attracted to on a sexual or romantic level is evolving, which is really nice because I don't think that I'm ever gonna get what I need on an emotional level from the alpha male that I just described.
sure.
I don't think that a man like that, that is really entrenched in their straightness on every level, like a man who is into upholding these roles, I don't think that I'm ever gonna get what I want on an emotional level from that kind of man.
Where do you think that fantasy comes from?
It comes from the soap operas, honestly, yeah. I think that it really I started watching them too young.
Yeah,
And, like, my mom didn't even know that we were watching them because we would hide in the hallway of our apartment, and from the hallway, you could see the TV in the living room,
yeah.
but when my mom was sitting on the sofa, she couldn't see us in the hallway.
Which ones would you watch?
So it was The Bold and the Beautiful and The Young and the Restless.
Okay.
Those were the 2 main ones, and then later on when I was in high school, I really, like, loved As the World Turns.
Okay.
That was, like, a big one. They're all basically the same though, you know?
I used to watch one called Passions.
Oh, well, Passions is amazing and an anomaly because it had magic and a whole bunch of weird shit. And I guess it's not just the soap operas, you know what I mean? I think that, like, when I look at the media that I consumed, like, Disney movies play a part in
Yeah,
upholding heteronormativity and, female codes and male codes.
yeah,
Even watching I used to watch the old '60s Batman show, and, like, even Batman's interactions with Catwoman are, like, very heteronormative,
yeah,
and again, are sort of, um, exploring the power dynamic that exists in the hetero world between men and women.
yeah.
So it's all of those things. I think it's the collective media, um, experience that I had growing up that really, um, shaped my views of, like, what a man is and what a woman is and what I'm attracted to. But there must also be a part of it that I naturally gravitated towards, right? Because I think we can all agree that you don't really choose who you're attracted to.
Well, a question that I've had for myself over time as well, and maybe you'll relate to this or not, but like not having an early father figure kind of
Mm,
enabled me to project a lot of what I thought the male figure of the household would look like. It
right.
became a really defined fantasy, I think, in some
Yeah.
ways that like, oh, if I had that role model or that closeness, that maybe that would give me what I'm looking for in male connection. But um, the people that I've been attracted to in my life never like met that sort of ideal. It's just very different. It's
Right.
too like media influence, I think, in some ways. But I've often wondered if that fantasy was created from that moment of childhood of like, oh, I don't have a father figure that's present. And I'm seeing what the world puts out there for that figure to look like.
Mm.
And then am I trying to somehow make the fantasy out of that. I'm not sure if it's super clear.
I think I get what you're getting
Yeah.
at, but then where does the sexual element come into it? Because I agree with you that there's something in the space, the empty space
Yeah.
of the absent father figure, because I experienced that too. But you did grow up with a stepfather for a decent amount of
Later
your
in life.
upbringing. Like,
Yes.
how when did he enter the picture?
He married my mother when I was like 6, 7 years old.
Okay, so a little bit, but still quite young, but later, yeah. Whereas I never even had we had a I mean, my mom did remarry briefly, when I was a kid, like, I was around 3 or 4, but it was very short-lived, and,
Okay.
like, my memories of him are very minimal. It's a weird thing.
Interesting. I never knew this. I need to know more. But for
I
what
think that it's something that
that
I've, like, repressed a little bit. My sister has this weird memory of him basically, like, punishing me and telling me to go to my room and, like, holding the door closed,
okay.
and my sister, like, hitting him with, like, a toy, to, like, get him to, like, let go of the door so that I could get out, which I also vaguely remember. Um, but I think he was a pretty, like, volatile person. Like, I think he was a very aggressive man, and so, like, for that maybe year that he was in our lives, like, I think it brought from memory, not an abusive, situation, but an aggressive male energy
Okay.
into our household, which I think I've really repressed, but I was also very young, I
Yeah.
was, like, 3, so my memory, of course, is not super strong, but outside of that, like, I mean, the closest thing that I had to a father figure was my grandfather,
Uh-huh.
who, like, we were extremely close with, like we've said before on the podcast, like, my grandparents really raised me and my sister. But, like, my grandfather and as much as he grew up, within, like, the Egyptian culture, which is, like, a culture that also sort of has a very rigid definition of masculinity, but also in a way there is a softness to Middle Eastern men too, sometimes that's very gay coded.
Especially man to man
Yeah.
culture. It's so soft and affectionate.
Yeah, so, like, my grandfather did not represent, like, the male authority.
Yeah.
Like, my grandfather was, like, a very, like, gentle and loving person. Like, I never felt, like, scared around him or that I had to perform masculinity, which I might have felt had there been, like, a father in my life. But to get back to that question that you've been asking yourself, I guess not that I would counter it, because I do think that there's something, again, really interesting about what takes place in the absence.
Exactly.
But in relation to that, I think about some of the straight cis women, not that I know necessarily personally, but that I also see in media where there is this like daddy's girl thing going on where it feels like it's almost crossing a line. I'll give you an example that comes to mind, like Jessica Simpson and her father.
Uh-huh.
They had this closeness that was very strange. That just seemed like a lot,
Okay.
and that mirrors or mimics a wife-husband relationship. And I remember he did this interview with Rolling Stone, like at her peak of popularity in like the early 2000s, where he gave her like a promise ring that she wouldn't lose her virginity until she was married, and all that weird concept of the daddy's girl, even just within the tradition of marriage, where it's like the father that gives the daughter away to
Yeah.
the next man who's now going to be taking care of the girl. And sometimes you have these girls that are so obsessed with their fathers. I love like wedding reality shows, like Say Yes to the Dress, and like all those kind of shows. And very often I've seen these women basically say to their fathers, like, no man could ever replace you, daddy, you know? Which is just so
Cannot relate.
weird and it's so creepy. But I'm like, but these are girls who grew up with their fathers. And so they didn't have that absence or
Mhm.
the empty space within that absence. And yet there is still a weird, sometimes psychosexual
Right.
relationship that is formed.
Daddy issues can occur whether you have a dad or not.
Definitely, that for sure. Yes. It's like there's no escape. Whether you grew up with a dad or not, you're gonna be fucked up if you're attracted to men.
Yeah.
There's no way out. It's like being attracted to men is inherently problematic in the sense that it's going to cause you
Yeah.
problems, which is weird.
A question that I have for you is how much of orientation takes up your identity?
I don't think it takes up a big part for me. I
Okay.
think gender identity, you can listen back to episode 1, um, definitely is something that I feel more strongly about or more connected to because I'm not attached to any orientation. Because again, like if I were to meet even let's just say a cis woman
Yeah.
that I just feel that electricity for, and let's just even say hypothetically that it was mutual, I would not close myself off to that. Like,
Mhm.
I would pursue that, I would engage in it. Whereas I know, well, I mean, I'll say this especially for straight men because it's usually my interaction with them. Sometimes straight men, um, who do find themselves either attracted to a trans woman or even a male identifying person,
Mhm.
they will fight that attraction.
Yeah.
There will be often a reluctance to explore it because they so rigidly define themselves through their heterosexuality.
Right.
For those men, their heterosexuality is a big foundational part of their identity and how they see
Yeah.
themselves.
Orientation is dictated or has limitations just based on societal norms and gender
Yeah,
roles. Like that our orientations are not necessarily, maybe this is not the right word, but the way I'm thinking of it is like it's not free will, that we have so many constraints that even if we are openly attracted to somebody, something, or some context, there is like a society structure above it that's going to basically guide if you're okay or not with accepting that,
right.
unconditional attraction.
Which is the freedom of queerness because we
Right,
tend to not care about that social structure that is trying to impose on us,
right.
you know? Because I think that that societal structure, or like, and not to get too like abstract or conceptual, but like we have spoken about it in other episodes. Like, if you think about like the power of the capitalistic control, it just wants us all to be breeders.
Yeah.
It that system, the power structure in our society needs people for its operations,
Mhm.
and so they're dependent on us really just breeding,
Yeah.
and that's, obviously such a big part of heterosexuality, you know? I mean, obviously, there are straight people who don't want kids and don't have kids,
Yeah.
but I know that straight people often feel a pressure that maybe a lot of queer people don't,
Mhm.
to have kids or just to conform, but I do think that, like, our society is kind of set up in a way that it wants us
Mhm.
partnering up heterosexually in order to procreate.
Yeah.
I mean, even the church back in the day,
Mhm.
like, they were a big driver of that, like, they were the ones encouraging, well, not necessarily encouraging directly, but often being like, "Contraception is against God. It's
Sure.
God's will for you to have 16 kids."
Yeah.
Whereas, like, queerness is like, no, I'm not gonna have 16 kids." I don't know, I think it's like I do agree with you that, like, there are things in society that limit how much of our sexuality we'll allow ourselves to explore,
Right.
but I think, at least for now, in North America, I feel like y if you're stopping yourself from exploring your sexuality, it's because you're giving in to the pressure. Whereas, like, in other cultures, like, something really terrible might happen to you if you do it, which is
Right.
a very real thing. But even in North America, we're getting to that point, so
Right.
fuck whoever you can now while you can.
You've heard it here first.
I find it interesting the people who really will stop themselves from an experience.
Yeah.
Again, unless there's either a legal, or safety reason to not. I think it's interesting people that really hold on very rigidly to their orientations as an identity.
Mhm.
Um,
So would you say that sexual orientations exist because of that society construct, or there really is something that people do have, containers or area? I'm really interested in this type of
right.
attraction. Or if we didn't have the society norms of, capitalism or
Male,
gender
female, yeah,
roles,
gender roles.
would sexual orientation just not exist and we would be more fluid?
I think so.
Okay.
I really do because I don't believe in the absolutes when it comes to sexuality. I don't believe that anyone is 100% gay. I don't believe in anyone being 100% straight.
Mhm.
I just there's something to me that is not human about
Sure.
those extremes.
Yeah.
Because again, I just don't think you can ever know who you might meet.
Mhm.
Like I know someone, a friend of mine who for her whole life, she's a cis woman, was attracted to men, had relationships with men, and wasn't in any kind of denial about her sexuality, but one day met a woman who she just really fell in love with,
Mhm.
and they had a relationship, and I so that's why I always think of them because I'm just like, you just never know who you're gonna meet.
Sure.
And why again, why close the doors?
Yeah.
Why make a decision that I am only attracted to men and I'm only ever gonna be attracted to men?
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand what the point of making a decision like that is.
And also, I think there are ways that people present themselves in the world to construct their identity. But then there's also a flip side to their sexual exploration, which can be quite contradictory to the identity that they project to the world.
Like, what did you have an example?
Like, somebody who's into cachet sexual experience, but they kind of keep those things separate. It's like, okay, I'm being perceived as a certain way,
Right.
but then in the dungeon, down in the dark, I could become something very different.
Right.
Not me personally, but
Are you
I've
sure?
I've never been to the dungeon, so I don't know what might come out. But I think people wanting to explore those things that they are suppressing,
Yeah.
and then they go almost to an extreme or find alternative ways to express it, which might not align with what they traditionally present to the world because of society norms.
Are you thinking about Nicole Kidman and Baby Girl?
I do think about that movie a lot.
But do you consider fetishes as being part of an orientation, or is that just a totally other animal?
Good question. I don't know. I think that you can have fetishes in any orientation. I guess there's kind of maybe a separation for me of like what you are attracted to as a person and then what you're attracted to sexually as an activity.
Okay, right, right.
And um, I think that sometimes I've just been surprised. Like in the past on dating apps, like I will see somebody that's at the gym and I've seen them for years. And then suddenly I discover their dating profile and it's like, oh, there's like a whole other side to this person that's much more like um, sexually open to orientations and fetishes that they just never presented in the limited information that they.
Right, right, right. Do you think that and again, it's sort of interesting because we are in this moment in time right now where we're regressing so much
Yeah.
when it comes to sexuality and gender identity, so it's a very weird time, um, and context, but do you feel like there's been a general trend, even let's just say within your circle of people that you know, of people sort of becoming more openly fluid and less rigidly following the same patterns of attraction?
Yes, I think so. The ideals or like the presets of what people would expect somebody to be attracted to has become looser
Mhm.
or more fluid or more open. I'm often more surprised when I see people who are dating certain people. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting that they're together.
Right.
Whereas historically, they might have always went for the same type of person.
Yeah.
So I think there is an openness from I guess, different perspective that hasn't existed prior.
Mhm.
But I also feel that there's more space in, at least like in the gay umbrella, Um, Maybe due to the queer umbrella that we see different identities of what it means to be queer,
Right.
and um, that we haven't been able or had visibility or the same level as visibility as we've had historically. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that's so interesting because it does make me think what we were talking about earlier and like the way that media influenced our early attraction
yeah.
and how we perceived masculinity or even femininity. But then when you think about the images that exist now, even within the mainstream,
Mhm.
we actually see softer versions of masculinity. And often we get to see them um, in an attractive light.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, maybe earlier on in the media that we consumed as kids in the 90s, when we would see depictions of a softer masculinity, it was always presented very negatively. Like,
Exactly.
that's the last thing you wanna be. If you're like that, no one will desire you. And maybe there's a training that goes on subconsciously to either judge it or to automatically shut down whatever attraction you might feel towards it.
Yeah. I think in media in general, we have so many more different visual representations of identity. Like it could be softer masculinity or just more radical depictions of clothing or
Yeah.
body expression. I think we've always had them, but I don't know if we've had them so much in a queer context. We're
Exactly.
starting to see more um, acceptance, and also like it's really so interesting to me that when I see a young artist or a singer that is really soft in masculinity, I don't know if they're straight or gay.
Mhm.
I see gay men attracted to them. I see like teenage girls attracted to them, and that there's like this open or liberation of what it means to be attracted to something that's
Yeah.
also expanding.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. Um, because again, I really do think that media shapes us a lot on a
Mhm.
subconscious level,
Yeah.
and I think back to like the documentary Disclosure, which if people still have not seen it is so essential, which is basically like a history of like trans representation in media. And, in movies like Ace Ventura or whatever, just these like mainstream things that were so culturally dominated transness, whether it was trans women or trans men, but I think especially trans women, that was more the fixation. There's more representations of that. Um, were always shown in a way that was very sort of monstrous,
Yeah.
and that the only people that would ever be attracted to a trans person are either deranged or they've been tricked,
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, again, not having the vocabulary to identify myself as trans, but I do know that at a certain point, when I was getting closer to an understanding of my gender, there was this idea of like, oh, like no one's ever going to desire me
Mhm.
because even I can't see how a trans person could be attractive because of all of these horrible images that I've grown up with, that I've internalized.
Mhm.
Like the message really was that like trans people are not attractive. Trans people are monstrous. And even within like the gay male world, like more feminine men are depicted as being unattractive, and it's like it's only in gay males' ability to approximate alpha straight male visually and emotionally that like they suddenly become desirable.
It's really sad, but it's interesting that we're seeing different representations of gay male.
Well, it makes me think of like what I love in the strides that we've made over the last few years in terms of like trans and queer visibility in mainstream media is that it's really positive. And not only positive, it's sexy.
Yeah.
Like I see so many images like daily now
Yeah.
of like hot trans men, hot trans women who are like owning their sexuality, celebrating it, showing it off. It's alluring.
Mhm.
And I think that even for gay men or even straight men that are, you know, sort of expressing a softness, that's also done in a way that just feels really sexy.
Mhm.
And it always was. It's just that we were taught to not see it that way. So I have a few like more rapid fire questions for you in terms of your orientation. Have you ever been attracted to a woman?
I don't think so. It's never come up for me.
Do you like, do you ever when, like, watching, let's just say, a movie that's, like, erotic, that really showcases, like, female sexuality, not necessarily lesbianism, but, like, even just I in relation to men,
Mhm.
like, is there part of that that you find
Not at all. Like, when
alluring?
I see a woman, it's more about her beauty, but it's not an erotic attraction at all.
Have you ever kissed a girl?
Yes, I have.
Was it just a kiss or was it, like, making out?
There's been kissing and making out, but I've never had sex with a woman.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you? Have you ever been attracted to a girl?
I feel very similarly to the way that you just described. Like, I do think that, femininity is really alluring. It's something that it's weird because when and I think I've said this before, but when I do sort of embody a kind of, like, hyper femininity, I do feel turned on.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't feel that when I'm observing it in someone else.
Mhm.
Like you, I do see the beauty in it. Um, I do think it's very sexy to watch a woman use her sexuality.
Yeah.
Like again, like from the soap operas, but not even the soap operas, even Madonna, like and her sex book and like watching her be really empowered by her sexuality and really own it and just be so forward with it. Like I think that's hot,
Okay.
but I'm not attracted to her.
Got it. When I'm watching a movie and there's a sex scene or something, I'm really focused on what the man is doing and how the situation is unfolding. And that's why Baby Girl was so interesting to me, overall. And I think there's many things that we could say about the film that there was a missed opportunity on a lot of levels, but I don't feel that there's an erotic component
Okay.
that arouses me from female, even if she's embodying
Okay.
sexy. It's more like, wow, she looks good, or like,
Right.
good for her, or
Yeah.
all of that. And the things that turn me on from a male perspective, or like the attraction component, they're often really subtle.
Like what?
Just the way the person is like moving or
Mm.
gesturing. I think gesture is a big thing that I find very interesting. Like, even in Baby Girl, like they go to kiss and he pulls back, and there's like really a tension there just in that gesture that I find really erotic.
Um, have you ever been attracted to a trans man?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if the person was trans or not in all
Right.
cases, but yeah, like it's not something that I've actively seeked out to see if I was attracted to or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Noted. Yeah. I think again, like you said very early on, like there's so many levels to attraction
Yeah.
that it's not just physical, although it is partly.
Yeah.
Like I think to pretend that someone's appearance or physicality does not play a factor in your attraction to them. At least for me, I mean, I can't speak for anyone. Maybe there are people who are, isn't there a term for it? Probably. There must be a term
There
for it
must be.
of people who actually have no regard for the physical and their attraction is purely emotional or
Yeah, is it
spiritual.
aromantic or
Right, one of
sexual?
those. Sorry to the community that
Please DM
we're
us, update
ignoring.
us on the lingo.
But that's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
That's how I wish that I moved through the world that way.
And what do you think stops you?
Well, it's just I I am very fixated on visuals. Like visuals are a big part of my attraction, my sexual attraction to people.
Okay.
And again, I didn't choose that. I wouldn't choose that. I would love if I could be freed from whatever pull visuals have over me. Like I wish that I could be freed of it.
Yeah.
Um, because I think that I'd be more likely to find someone that I connect with in a romantic way.
It's such a contradiction. Like, if I think back to the internet episode, and like we were falling in love with people that we had never met and
But I was still picturing them visually.
sure, but like, it's you're capable, I think,
That's a good point, actually. That is a good point. But then the physical embodiment of the person would completely alter the fantasy that you
Sure.
had before you knew what they looked like, and then that fantasy could come crashing down.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the fantasy or the projection could be strong enough to survive the physical encounter if you're not feeling that physical
Yeah.
attraction.
If you had to describe your coming out story in one word, what would it be?
Can it be 2 words?
Oh, just one.
Kylie. I'm not even kidding. Before I arrived at, like, my understanding of my transness,
Yeah.
there was a time in my life, well, a big part of, like, my childhood and teenage years, and even early adulthood, where I was moving through the world or trying to move through the world as a cis gay man,
Yeah.
which again, as I've said, never felt right. But that's all the information that I had.
Mhm.
And I think that when I was growing up, like watching shows like Will and Grace or like other coming out stories, I felt like it was something that like you had to do.
Right.
Like I felt like an obligation. Um, and I mean, technically, the first person that I ever came out to was my childhood friend Crystal, who we've acknowledged before and will come up again surely. And I told her I was bi. And then in high school, I came out to my ethics teacher, um, who just felt like someone I could trust. And
Uh-huh.
like, I think I wanted to just like talk it out with an adult and be like, what is this? How do I go about this? Then I had a coming out with my high school best friend, Amanda,
Okay.
where like we went out for dinner. And I still vividly remember this night. Like, it was like snowing very lightly. We were at this Greek restaurant in the Rust Island called Arahova's.
Yeah.
And it was always hard to make plans with Amanda. And so, like, I kept trying to make this dinner plan to like come out to her, which felt very important to me, but I was also stressed and nervous about it. Um, anyway, finally we had the dinner and it was like, there's something I need to tell you. I'm gay. Bum, bum, bum. And it was so nothing. She was so accepting. Obviously, it was so obvious, so it wasn't ever a shock to anyone that I came out to. And then with my mom, I I never even if I was straight, I feel like I wouldn't share information about, like, my dating or romantic life with my mom.
Mhm.
So that was just something that I never really wanted to do or share with her. But she would always say things to me, like, she would literally say, sometimes just randomly, like, in the kitchen, "You know, there's nothing you could ever say or do that would ever make me love you any less." And it was so obvious that it was her way of saying, like, "It's okay if you're gay." And then one day, she drove me downtown so that I could get, Kylie Minogue's new album, Body Language, at the time, 2003, and in the car over to get Kylie's album, she started saying those things again, and then she also started asking questions like, "Do you think people are born gay? Do you think being gay is a phase?" And then she literally just point blank just asked me,
Uh-huh.
"Are you gay?" And I said, "Yes," and I, like, rolled my eyes. And I just wanted to, like, jump out of the car. I wanted to just, like, open the door on the highway and just roll out.
But you needed that Kylie album too bad, so
Exactly. Priorities. What was your coming out?
it was so uneventful. Like, I was in Newfoundland completely alone in the experience. I didn't know anybody who was gay. I didn't know how to navigate it at all. I remember telling my mother in a letter that I wrote to her, and then later telling some friends, but always feeling extremely terrified that, like, it would just be released to the world and then everybody would judge me that way. Like, there was just constant fear around it. So it was just a really lonely experience.
Mhm.
Never ever felt like warmed or embraced. And when I told people, it was like they understood it, but they didn't get it. Like, they didn't understand what it meant.
Okay.
I don't even think I knew, like,
Right.
really what it meant.
So what motivated you? Like, did you feel the same obligation that I felt? Like, did you feel like it was something you had to do?
Yeah, I felt like I had to get it out.
Okay.
Like, I felt that I couldn't move forward with my life or
Okay, okay.
and that felt that I wouldn't know how to move forward or what would be next unless I got past this
Right.
experience. So I came out at a young
Well, you
age.
said 13 at the
Yeah.
beginning of the episode.
And my mother didn't believe me at all. She's like,
Oh.
"How do you know? What does this mean?" She's like, "How could you know that you're gay? You've never slept with a woman." And I was like, "Well, how do you know that you're not a lesbian? You've never slept with a woman."
And did she sleep with a woman after that?
But it was like me trying to fight for space, being like, "That's okay," or "This is accepting." I mean, it took my parents a long time to become comfortable with it, but
Mhm.
they never, like, disowned me or made me feel bad, but they were very worried about, like, what the perception would be. I come from such a small town, like, less
Yeah.
than 1,000 people. So
Did it make the newspaper?
yeah.
Did your
No.
mom sell the letter to the local tabloid?
Not yet. Um, if you were to describe your sexual orientation with just a noise, what would it be?
Oh my god.
Is it a scream? Is it a grunt? Is it
Well, do you want me to make the noise?
Oh, I do, yeah.
Oh my god, this is so embarrassing. I don't know if I can. I feel like I don't even feel like it would be no, I don't know if I can do that.
Describe it then.
It would be like a moan of ecstasy, like Donna Summer, "Love to Love You, Baby." I feel but, like yeah, I think it would be that sound just because, again, I do think and even though it is evolving, and again, I am finding myself attracted to people of different gender expressions, that I might not have been so not that I wouldn't have been open to it, but just, like, I was just so, again, fixated on, like, hot men.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the noise would be, yeah, like a kind of, like, female orgasmic kind of noise that just represents the kind of, like, erotic or sexual surrender to the power of a man. 'Cause it's still like, again, as fucked up as it is and, like, as much as I would love to move on from it, like, I'm still drawn to hyper masculinity, in a sexual way. And it's not just, like, an energy thing, although that definitely is a part of it, but even physically. Like, you said it in episode 1, I love the presence of a boner, like, I love the sight of it, like, it excites me to see, like, a male body in its most stereotypical hypermasculine form in all its
I'm
dimensions,
just too prune-ish, like,
which is so surprising to me.
I the idea of, like, the penis or the cock being out is just too vulgar. I'm like, "Cover it up with some nice underwear."
I'm the opposite. I'm, like, yanking the underwear off. I'm like, "Take it off. Show me that dick." What would your sexual orientation be in a noise?
Woof.
I knew you were gonna say that.
No, that's just the first one that comes to mind, but I think it would just be like a grunt. It would
Hmm.
be just very short, simple, and, well-placed.
A well-placed grunt.
Correct.
Like punctuation.
Yes, there would be grammar in my grunt.
Love it.
Um, yeah, I guess kind of to wrap it up, one thing that I was just thinking a lot about for this episode, there is, you know, the element of love is just so powerful, and it feels that we're sort of through society not able to access
Yeah.
love. And I guess like if I would put out something into the world, and I'm curious what you think about it, is like the orientation should just be love, or like
Ugh, that's my noise. Ugh.
we don't like I think there's a utility to having the labels of different orientations and it helps us navigate the world, But I think that if we sit down and look at ourselves and see what we're attracted to from what we love,
Yeah.
it's just such a beautiful way to navigate in a more looser, less rigid way of thinking about orientation.
Honestly, Adam, like, that's, like, genuinely so beautifully said. I really felt that in my soul. Because I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier when I was talking about, like, maybe the sort of romantic dimension that I feel in, like, deep friendship, you
Yeah.
know? It's the love,
Mhm.
and love is powerful, and I think that even when we think about, like, sexual attraction, I think sometimes it's the feeling of, like, being alive in a way or awakened,
Yeah.
and I think that love, whether it's expressed sexually or not, um, is a force that does make you feel awakened,
Mhm.
and alive and warm, and I guess even though I've never thought about it in the way that you just expressed it, I think that that is where my natural orientation is.
Mhm.
Because, like, I am single and I've been single for a long time and, like, very happily so. And, like, there have been, you know, little relationships here and there. But I think that I'm so fulfilled by my deep friendships that I don't feel like I'm missing anything
Uh-huh.
because even that, like, attraction or whatever you wanna call it, even though it's not again, it's not sexual, like, it's there, it's present, you know? And, again, it feels good and it feels fulfilling.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that you could, or anybody could, find a lot of love and meaning in life through various people and various types of
Yeah,
relationships, and that maybe sexual components don't need to always be intertwined with love,
exactly.
or the excitement and the awakening that sexual attraction gives you maybe just satisfies you in other ways.
Yeah, exactly, and I do think that that's why, like, again, I'm sort of in my, like, demisexual era because, yes, like, to express my sexuality and to engage in sexual activity with someone that I'm physically attracted to is fun, but I think I use that more to just kind of numb and distract myself.
Mhm.
Like, it doesn't feel fulfilling, you know what I mean? The way that it feels fulfilling and exciting to, like, have a really deep conversation with a good friend, like,
Yeah.
that's so much more stimulating than sex often is.
Yeah.
Because yeah, to quote Kylie Minogue, "What is love without the finer feelings?
Yeah.
It's just sex without the sexual healing."
Well, you've heard it here first. Trenna is single, so make sure to slide into her DM.
Oh my god, no. No one ever does, honestly, no one ever does. But I think that's the perfect note to end not that I'm single, that's not the note to end on, but the note to end on here, I really do believe is, let's think about the orientation leading us towards love.
Yeah.
Um, and I think also I would like to just say that, like, I feel like this is gonna be, like, such an ongoing conversation, like, things that we brought up in this episode and even the gender episode, like, they're gonna carry over, and I think that we all need the freedom to evolve and not be attached to definitions that we've imposed on ourselves, like, basically, I'm trying to say, like, I could be straight in a month.
Yes.
Don't hold me to whatever I've said today. Don't try to tie us down.
Well, thank you for listening, everyone.
If this conversation left you wanting more, please subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating, and pass us along to someone who likes it unfiltered.
Follow us on Instagram at Gotta Be Deep.
Now, do it now. Adam just grunted for you.
And a sultry thanks to Farron Isles for our theme song, Wipe My Memory Clean.